Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting Frozen Michael and Patty show coming to you live, recorded, of course, from the Charlottetown waterfront, looking out at a frozen Hillsborough River and a Canadian Coast Guard boat cutting through the ice. Patty, good morning.
Good morning, Michael. Yes, it's actually a really cool sight. You just see the water splashing up on the sides of it as it's cutting through some of the ice that's formed since it's been, I guess, at port or however you want to. It's been docked.
I see you spent a lot of time on commercial liners.
No, I have not.
We're going to get right into it today, and what we're going to get into is my assistant, ChatGPT, and what we're referring to is the professional version, the version you pay your $30 a month Canadian for, or whatever it is. We were taught in our classes in the United States that that's what we needed to do because it would give you much better results, and it does. But you also have to toggle, for purposes of this experiment, the thinking tab on. Have you used the thinking tab before in ChatGPT, or I guess you and I are also using Gemini?
Yes, I use most of the functions. I'm sure there is an additional education or training course that you can utilize, but we have done training on how to, I guess, set up the prompts that you put in, whether you're using the thinking or the project or write for me features of ChatGPT to generate the best results for you.
So last week, we talked about one of the clauses on the contract, specifically the water test paragraph that's on the Schedule A. This is a set of paragraphs that's been pretty well standardized right across the real estate business in North America that requires a water test to be done. The water test is not a requirement of a conveyance or a sale, although some people seem to think that. It is a requirement most of the time on a mortgage, and sometimes can be negotiated, specifically in the winter. Right now, everything's frozen. If I decide to buy a cottage or a house and it's vacant, winterized, and I can't do a water test, I can just simply say to the bank, I can't get a water test done. And in many cases, they'll just waive the water test. Have you experienced that at all?
No, I usually see them push back a bit. I always recommend, as a listing agent, before my clients winterize their home, to get a water quality certificate test completed, just in case a sale is generated over the winter months.
But then it's going to come back in your face because they're going to want something within the last 90 days or 180 days. Typically, it was 6 months, and then they tightened it up to 3 months. How do you answer that?
Again, I get them to do the water test as late as they can. A lot of times it's done sometime in October or the beginning of November, which will take us through until the end of January. I don't find there's a lot, Michael, and maybe you're coming across this more with the 90 days, but depending on the lender, it is either between 90 days or 6 months seems to be the two cutoffs. And I feel if I was the lender looking at a file, I would be far more inclined to accept a water quality certificate that might be 120 days old versus a home that didn't do the necessary steps in preparation of a winter sale potentially, and there is no water quality certificate.
Let's get back to AI. So what have you found people's basic perception, or how positive or negative are people generally? And we had this conversation with one of the people that works for another brokerage. She had an opinion where she wasn't crazy about AI and didn't like it. And she also stated that it's going to replace jobs, which obviously it has. What have you found the public perception been with AI and the use in real estate for the purposes of this conversation?
Surprisingly, there are still not many who are benefiting or utilizing this tool, which AI is just a tool to better do, and again, speaking from a real estate industry perspective, to better do our business, writing overviews and things like that, or the research like you've done today, Michael, that you're going to talk about. I still find there is a vast majority of the population that's adverse to using it because they feel that if they're somebody that doesn't commit to using, the tool that's available to them, they may slow down the advancement of technology because they're not going to buy into it because it scares them.
So what I did is in our last conversation on the previous podcast, I talked about the water test clause. And in my opinion, when I looked at it, I thought this is not very well written. There's way too many holes in it, despite the fact that the association probably spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars looking at this clause over the course of 2 or 3 years. But I thought, hey, maybe I'm wrong. What do I know? I'm not a lawyer. What are your thoughts on the water test clause?
It is loosey-goosey.
Like a lot of the clauses.
Yes.
So I ran it through. I had this idea. I thought it was a really good idea to run it through the paid thinking version of ChatGPT. And I basically said, tell me what you think about this paragraph. How well is it written? What are the negatives? What are the positives? If you were to rewrite it, what would that look like? The response that I got was hilarious. I'll let you read it because you haven't seen this at all.
No.
The response, by the way, that ChatGPT gave me, analyzing this one paragraph, was 5 pages long. It was very impressive what it did.
Okay, so I'll just read. Here's the straight read on it. The clause is serviceable but clunky. Oh, clunky's a different way.
I like clunky.
It's not terrible, and the legal intent is mostly clear, but it is overwritten, repetitive, and awkward in spots. It reads like something drafted by a committee after 3 coffees and 1 minor panic. I would call it a poorly written from a drafting standpoint, even though the substance is mostly fine.
So without getting into 5 pages of analyzing one paragraph, the point to this is AI can be a great tool to analyze your legal documents. In a lot of cases, Patty and I will construct clauses from scratch. I know some agents don't feel they maybe are competent or don't believe in themselves enough to do that, so they'll pay a lawyer to do it. Regardless of the case, here's a clause that probably sat around for 2-3 years, probably been used for 20, analyzed by lawyers, by association members, sent to the Canadian Real Estate Association, presumably for approval. Yet when we apply AI to it, it basically says it's clunky, overwritten, repetitive, and awkward. And it also gets into, it says it covers some key points. It's too long, it repeats itself. The way they describe the government of Canada is awkward. And I found this interesting, which I never picked out. I've picked out other words. Clear test is a bit odd. Calling the result a clear test is ununderstandable, but slightly unnatural. A better defined term might be satisfactory water test report, passing water test report, compliant water test report. Clear test needs to go. That's just an example of this 5-page report, but it was really interesting how it took this paragraph, analyzed it, and then it shot out at the end here a final version, which looks a lot better. And you can't see it because this is my research, and we're going to move on to the next subject.
But that looks like you're going to need a whole Schedule B for that, for the length that I'm seeing, that the cleaned up final version of the water test clause.
You have to keep in mind I'm using a very large font so you can see it.
Yeah, so that you can see it. And I mean, the last podcast episode, why we were getting into this in the first place. So if you haven't listened to episode 128, we were discussing why are agents today deleting or doing a removal of the water test clause, which is what sparked all of this. And it's been an interesting research endeavor.
Because the way it's written, it doesn't automatically remove.
Correct.
Right? It also doesn't give the ability to the purchaser to approve the water test. I've often thought, if I do a water test and do 25 different water tests because I can't pass, and then there's a good one because I luck out that day and submit that, as well as the other 24, there's no provision in there for them not to accept that. The other thing I've always had an issue with is the stupid language about the vendor or the owner may fix the problem? Why even mention that? Obviously, they may. And it says here, it's redundant. So it says tighten the repair language.
Yes.
Either they're going to fix it or they're not. Obviously, they may. Well, it's just ridiculous. It's not like something that was written in a half an hour. This is years of analysis, and just like the opening paragraph.
Which may be why lenders want to see this removed, because it is a little clunky.
Something that was drafted by a committee after 3 coffees and 1 minor panic. Moving along. As a buyer, in this case, one that's not very honest, contacting the seller directly. Basically, what they're trying to do is circumvent the real estate agents and become all frenzy with the owners. And what they're going to do is they're going to say, well, if you were to remove the listing contract or when this expires, contact me and I'll make you a ridiculously lowball offer on the house and you'll save commissions. Your net will be a lot less, but I'm helping you out.
Yeah, without them saying all of that, that's what it actually translates to.
So what are your feelings about buyers contacting the sellers, and what should the sellers do when they receive this typically phone call? Maybe it could be an instant message from Facebook. My suggestion is don't communicate, don't respond, ignore it, or just direct them to their buyer's agent.
Or, again, now we're talking about a seller.
Or listing agent.
Yeah, so the seller receives whatever form of communication from a buyer directly. As a seller, for all sellers listening to this, don't feel you're helping your listing agent. If you have a good listing agent, they will take care of this by responding and maybe answering some questions and trying to see, I know it can be exciting. Oh, we have a buyer, we have somebody interested, so I'm going to see what I can do to keep them on the hook or interested. You are going to end up negotiating yourself.
You're going to lose your leverage.
Well, 100%. And you hired a real estate professional for a reason. That buyer has disrespected the process and your request to have representation by deciding to circumvent the very service that you ended up, requesting or paying for, I guess, at the sale of the property. And I just find that to be a little rude and pushy and disrespectful. So don't do it. And if you're a buyer and you feel that your agent isn't doing a good enough job, or you don't have an agent and you're just thinking that you're going to play real estate agent and you're going to reach out to the seller, you were able to find their information, because it is public information at the registry office, to find out who owns a property and look them up on Facebook and send them a private message. If that seller has requested the services of a real estate professional, respect their space, respect their privacy, and don't intrude on them. They've got representation for a reason.
What happened here is it's a smaller community, so this person that moved into this community, that's a professional, ended up asking some of the neighbors for their contact information, which the neighbors gave this person, which they should have never done without the permission of the sellers. In this particular case, you've got a purchaser that's looking at $1 million home that's already told me numerous times it's way overpriced, so she wants to buy it for $600,000, and we've already told her 10 times that's not going to happen, so I guess she felt reaching out to the vendors directly was going to give her more negotiating ability, which it didn't. At the end of the day, we ended up taking the listing off the market because it was actually making money in the rental market.
And this is a good lesson, too, because the agent that's involved in your scenario here, Michael, was not aware, hadn't spoken to the client in a few weeks or so. And so one, as a buyer's agent, you should, especially have your buyer's agreement signed, have better communication and keep in touch with your clients because you have promised a service to them. So the absence of, well, I just haven't heard from them for,
a month, 2 months.
Yes. Is just not acceptable. You should be following up with them. And you should also, as a buyer's agent, educate your buyer as to what the process looks like. And as a buyer, you should be consulting with your agent. That's why you hired them.
But in Prince Edward Island, in all fairness to the listeners, we don't use buyer's contracts the way they're used in other provinces and states. They should be used 100% of the time. Here, they don't. A lot of the agents are coming from a point of desperateness. Would that be the right word?
They just like being realtor/tour guide.
Right. In this case, you've got an agent that thinks I got a buyer, unbeknownst to her, this particular buyer has reached out to me. They reached out to the vendor. They've reached out to Patty back in 2019, was it?
Yeah.
Hardly a qualified buyer. Plus the fact that in PEI, you call about a property and it could be a 2-hour drive there, 2-hour drive back. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me to be playing tour guide, wasting conceivably 5 or 6 hours by the time you show the property, have discussion, whatever the case may be.
And then get nothing.
Oh, the old ghosting. Yes, we love the ghosting portion. The old...
We're going to think about it.
Thanks very much for the showing, Patty. It's an interesting property, and, we're just flying back this afternoon, and we're going to think about it. Do you remember our trainer, Floyd Wickman, with his illustration of thinking about it? They're not thinking about it. And what they'll typically do is end up ghosting you when you text, call, or email them.
Yes.
And thousands of times has that happened.
Oh, many times.
And usually it's because you never had a buyer's contract signed.
Not had a buyer's contract. And in early years I know speaking for myself, just wasn't properly trained as to what the process looks like qualifying a buyer and making sure that and it still happens. Once in a while, a couple times a year, maybe you might get that. It just sounds all good. The buyer gives you all the right answers, whereas at the end of the day, they were just kind of using you to get through the house and
look for decorating ideas,
building ideas,
nosy.
Or it was just a house while they were on vacation. They were really curious and they just always wanted to see the inside of it.
Let's talk about honesty as the best policy and how you as a buyer, when you tell all your friends that you beat up the vendors, the sellers, and you were a super negotiator for months and got that price down by 40-50% because of your knowledge of the negotiating methodologies, only to find out that all this information is public. And we've had this happen more than once in the last month where we get purchasers from another province tell their friends, well, they got $200,000 off, only to find out they paid more than full price and they didn't negotiate anything at all.
Yeah.
It's all this information's on our MLS system, which is Paragon. It's actually listed on realtor.ca in most cases, unless the agents ask for it to be removed. That is the sale price, if it's a relist. And it's in the tax computer. So we do see all this stuff. So if you're going to tell your friends about a house, don't be dishonest and tell them some story, because they end up coming here, putting offers in for $600,000 and $900,000, thinking that's the way it works, because my friend was able to negotiate this and so should I. Not only did your friend not negotiate that, but every seller is different. And it all relies on their motivation level and the ability for your agent, which is the professionally trained, hopefully, negotiator here to negotiate that deal for you based on market dynamics.
Yeah, the more you peel back the layers of that, obviously there's some psychological issues there to feel the need to lie. But then you also impact your relationships around you, because we've had this happen where a buyer misrepresented to their social circle the price that they were able to negotiate and secure a property for, only to have one of these friends end up looking to sell their property. And when the amount, because they said, well, I know our friends paid X amount of dollars, for this property, so I know I'm confident in getting this for mine, to show them the data on the registry and say, look, this is what they paid. I don't know what they're telling you. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table once, Michael, with a seller, and she was adamant. Like I had it on my phone. I was showing her, I pulled the registry. This is what your friend paid for their property. And she said, well, there must be a mistake. That's wrong. And I said, this isn't the system, this isn't wrong. I think your friend misrepresented. I'm really sorry, but this is what the data said. And she was mad. I mean, she did end up listing the property, but that impacted, I know, because she probably felt embarrassed arguing with me only to find out. And I mean, it wasn't an argument, but a discussion.
Did you yell at her and
No, I
start
didn't
stomping
yell.
your fist
I
on
didn't
the table?
yell. I just
Was there
said,
stomping of fists?
I'm sure there's some explanation. I didn't, but the very fact that I had concrete data, I think she just felt they put her in an uncomfortable position, probably questioned their friendship going forward, and it's just unnecessary. So find something else if you need to misrepresent your life with that people won't be able to catch you in your lie.
Did she pull your hair?
No, she didn't. She's a very sweet lady, but she was, I think, a little embarrassed because she was very firm on what the sale price was on a property a similar property in the neighborhood, and it wasn't.
Because she was trying to use that sale, which was made up, as a pillar for the evaluation on her house. Would that be
Correct.
fair?
Yes.
Right? So you just remove that pillar, so now she has no negotiating ability at all. Quick tip, if you do want to find out what a house is worth, ask your agent. They can bring up the history. They can bring up the tax computer. If you want, you can just call the PEI government, the taxation department, and they, I believe under the Public Records Act, have to tell you what that property sold for.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to look at Phil Rentals, spelt with 2 L's. Have you checked out this rental agency, Patty? You brought this to my attention, and it's probably something you want to stay away from. And I checked out, they even have a Facebook group, which looks really, really bad, or a Facebook page. Tell us about Phil Rentals and how they can help us remove money from our pocket that we'll never see on rentals that don't exist.
Okay, so full disclosure, I haven't done a deep dive. However, I have had a complaint from the public. And what the process is they ask you, you have to put in the postal code or the area in which you're looking to rent a home in. And then what they do is they will send you back. So one of our listings, Michael,
a new listing,
is a target of this and was sent off to her as being a rental opportunity potential. And she was told by this Facebook page, if she sent in an $85 fee, then she would be sent an application for this particular home. So there shouldn't be a fee involved in applying or putting your name on a list for a rental unit. And then when she questioned further, because as she was on the phone, she said she Googled the address and discovered that it was listed, and then asked the individual, and whomever is answering this phone for this rental Facebook group said, oh, the listing agent hasn't taken it down yet. Don't go to the door because the tenants that are currently in there have not moved out completely, and the seller does not want to be disturbed. Everything is to go through me. So I've been trying to find, and the best she could do was send me this link. We just want to make sure whether it is this site, and maybe he has, or whomever the individual is, has a legitimate rental or not.
They don't.
Okay, well, the point of this topic is to make sure that if somebody is posting that they have a rental, I would be recommending Google search the rental, the address, make sure there's no listing, because if there's a listing, it is a huge red flag that you might end up falling subject to a fraudulent situation in case. I would then call, which is what this lady did, called the listing agent. I asked her if she had anything further. She doesn't. So I'm just keeping an eye on this site right now and seeing if there's anything new that comes up so I can take some screenshots, which I have right now of the initial page, but to be able to inform or notify authorities of this.
So this has been happening for years, where fraudsters have been taking properties that are for sale. They'll download the pictures. They'll even leave the realtor logo on the picture, which is clearly, evidently showing you that this property is for sale. Otherwise, it wouldn't have the realtor logo on it, which you typically find on realtor.ca and realtor.com in the States. They advertise them for rent. Since the rental market is so hot and people are so desperate, in a lot of cases, they'll ask them for first, last, and security deposits, first, last month's rent and security deposits. So you're into thousands of dollars. You'd be surprised how many people do this only to find out that the property doesn't exist. I would recommend, if you are looking at a rental, talk to a real estate agent, because they're going to know if they're in that area, what this property is, the deal behind it, if it's been listed, if it's been sold. And in some cases, the agents will even check out the property in person at no charge or a minimal charge, which is a lot better than losing thousands of dollars putting your name on something that doesn't exist, presumably moving from another province in many cases, only to find out your moving truck pulls up to a house that you can't enter, or an apartment.
Yeah. And if you know somebody that's looking or has a conversation about renting or they're looking to rent, please share this information with them, because it's not something we're typically pretty honest. It wasn't something that you would see 10 years ago, but it is something now with there being the housing crisis and, the rental market is taking off here in Canada. It is something, actually, I attended a conference earlier this past week, and when they presented it on this graph, home ownership and real estate was just this bottom little snippet of this graph, whereas the rental market, it was so inflated. It's a huge market right now, which means for those who want to capitalize and take advantage, there is opportunity there. And unfortunately, this whole conversation that we're having is hopefully to protect the consumers against this.
Moving along, Patty, you've had listings in the past, and most recently one that someone wanted to list with you for sale, and you thought, this is a pretty juicy property, and I may want to buy this myself. I've been in this situation myself numerous times. Again, honesty is always the best policy, but how do you maneuver a situation where someone comes to you to list their house, which is looking for maximum value, and you're looking to buy the property? Presumably at this point, you've sort of lost all your negotiating ability, because if you're honest, you can't sort of play both ends of the field here as far as the buyer and the seller. You can't advocate both ends. How do you handle something like this so it doesn't turn into a conflict of interest?
So there is a form that we have. So our listing...
Forget about the forms. We don't want to see any more forms.
Okay. Well, there is a form to protect the listing agent.
But it's not listed.
I realize that. But here's my point, Michael. I would bring this into the equation, because this separate form that we have actually states that the agent explained the situation of, and again, an exclusive or very similar to what we're discussing here right now, that it would be in their best interest to list the property onto the MLS, the multiple listing system, to generate the highest amount of exposure and hopefully the most amount of money. And by allowing a sale to be exclusive or private, whether it's between the realtor and the seller, or if the realtor has a client, a contractor, whatever, you should look at getting that form signed to say, I explained to them this, and they still opted to go in this other direction. So I feel, which is exactly the conversation I have had, and nothing is in writing yet. I've been just making sure that these sellers are very well informed. They understand what, again, as a reputable listing agent, I take pride in my business, and I do make sure that for full disclosure, this is what you should and need to know so that I can lay my head down on my pillow at night with a clear conscience, knowing that I best represented and advised these clients. And at the end of the day, then, it becomes their decision. If they decide to move forward with you as an agent or a private sale, as a listing agent, please get this form signed that they accepted the representation just with yourself.
Okay, so now that you've legally protected yourself, how do we evaluate the property without biasing it towards yourself? Because really what you want is you want the property, the least amount of money. The vendor may, depending on their motivation, may or may not want more money for it. So how do you convey that?
Michael, that's actually a really good point, and it's something that we come across all the time when an agent calls up a seller and says, I have a buyer. So if you're a seller listening to this, who is that agent representing? I know it sounds exciting. You have a buyer for my property. Okay, I'm going to list my property with you. But exactly like what you're saying right now, who are they representing? Is that agent that has a buyer representing you as a seller or representing their buyer as a buyer client? What's the relationship with the buyer? That is something that happens all the time in our industry, and our sellers can kind of get pulled in and all excited.
How much am I selling this house to you for?
So to get to a CMA. So this particular home that we're talking about with regards to the example with me is I brought in another agent, being yourself, Michael. I did not go to do an evaluation on this home myself because it could be seen as a conflict that I am there trying to get the property at the best price for my client. So by bringing you in, you had also done a CMA, I had done a CMA, and came up with a fair market value for the property. Now, this property could go onto the MLS and maybe not even generate a price and evaluation of what we have given because the home is very, very small and it would be harder to finance and it doesn't meet the specs that most people look for. So by bringing in another agent, and however you have to, if you're a listing agent, you just say, hey, can you come? I'll give you a gift card to go out to a restaurant. I just need you to do
Where's
a CMA.
my gift card? This house is so small, you have to go outside to change your mind. The bottom line is, trying to cut this back down to the original question is, just get them to get an appraisal done. If they want, they can look at a CMA done by one or more agents that we can introduce the equation. At the end of the day, you can tell them, listen, the market's saying it's at $500,000. I'm offering you $475,000. I'm going to save you a bunch of money on fees and everything else. I'll cover your legal fees. There's no home inspection. I'm not asking for anything. If you want to leave everything behind, we'll get a dumpster and clean it out, because you do get into that in the lower end properties. So the bottom line is just be transparent. Show the seller the market data. Have them do an appraisal. Have them do 2 or 3 appraisals, but disclose everything. At the end of the day, if they just want to dump the house and they really don't care, just as long as you're treating them fairly or not misrepresenting anything, everything is good. In addition to that, you can sign Patty's form, which would exemplify her from any legal indemnity, which is what that form would do, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Moving along. This was funny. I had an agent call me from another market inquiring on one of my properties. It was a higher end property. And I'll let you answer this question, because I don't think I've ever had this question. Patty, this property you have on for $3 million, are they considering any price reductions, or are there any price reductions planned in the near future? Lift your jaw up.
I know. So this is an agent from another province that had called.
This is an agent from another province.
Okay. I would say no, because I don't negotiate on my client's behalf without their consent and permission. So I would be answering, no, the seller does not have any plans. Do you have somebody that may be interested in this property? And I would turn it around and get my clients off of the topic of conversation and find out more about where this is coming from.
They've already stated they have someone that might be interested in this property. They actually took it a step further, which was even more ironic, in the fact that they almost said or implied that they would be showing the property, flying from thousands of kilometers away to show this property. I'm thinking, you're probably not licensed in PEI, so you won't be showing this property. And furthermore, I'm not going to tell you if we've got price reductions planned or not. What I did tell them is I said it's an exceptional property. That's why you're looking from 2,000 kilometers away. It's waterfront. It's got 10 or 12 acres. It's a beautiful home, white sandy beach. We've had interest. We've had offers. If anything, I would think in the near future, we should be raising the price. So if I was you, I'd get on that plane. In fact, don't even get on that plane. Just write the offer.
Subject to viewing.
No, subject to nothing.
I know, but they could just, if they're serious, they would do that. So this is a person trying to negotiate the price without actually negotiating the price.
That's not licensed in the province for a buyer.
And trying to see if they can trip you up as a listing agent to negotiate the price down on the listing without your seller's involvement. Very shady.
Bizarro zone. Price reductions. Speaking of price reductions, would you say they're too commonly used as a sales tool? And I do know that some brokerages have a price reduction sales method where they bother and harass their vendors every week or so, whether it's a $2 price reduction or $1,000. You've seen them on the hot sheet we can see every day.
Yeah.
These little tiny price reductions, well, really, the homeowner should be looking at, like, what's the result of our marketing? How are we marketing this? What does the marketing look like? What's the responses, the questions, the offers, the results from the showings look like before we give in to these constant price reductions? And the other thing is, be aware of where the market is. Is it price, or is it because of the picture your agent took with his iPhone of the party that was happening on a Saturday night with 25 people drinking beer and a giant bonfire in front where the garbage cans are directly in front of the lens as well?
Yeah, this one here is, or they've put like AI photos of pretend people outside, AI generated. I am not a fan, and I understand, because what they end up saying is, I can go down, but I can't go back up. Can we start high? And when you take that course of action, that strategy, then you do find yourself needing a bunch of price reductions. Just be aware if your agent that you're working with maybe uses this as a strategy, buys your listing, allows you to list it at whatever price, and then just whether they get you preemptively to sign a form saying every so many days or every month there's going to be a price reduction of X amount of dollars until this sells, or it's not the best strategy to take because you will end up taking less money for that property.
The equation to selling a property is just imagine an old style scale where you have two sides and then these little plates. You put the weights on one side and what you're weighing on the other. Just imagine on one side you have the marketing, the other side you have the price. If the marketing's not in place, chances are the price is probably not going to matter that much because they're never going to get by the marketing materials, that being the pictures, video, the description. And there's all kinds of other little tidbits you can modify in a listing that will make it invisible to the public. We won't get into that.
Yeah, but if they're in balance...
Patty's hands are in the air now, emulating a scale.
Yes, because if they're in balance, so the price and the marketing, then all it is what is the average days on market and the absorption rates? What can you expect for that particular product in that particular price range? So that's the formula. If you're priced way too high, then just picture the scale out of whack.
I've had listings in the past that we knew, because we can see the stats from realtor.ca. We can also see stats in other places that showed there was great interest. There's a lot of people that had favorited this property. I know, they're sitting there watching, and they're looking for what, Patty?
They're looking for price reductions.
Right. So
for
what
the motivation.
happens? What happens when I go in there and I add $400,000 to the price?
Well, then
have you done this?
Fear of loss. No, I don't use this strategy.
I love it. The phone rings, either with the purchaser's agent or usually the purchaser saying, I've been watching this listing for the last 2, 3, 5 months. I've been waiting for a price reduction, and the price just went up $400,000. What happened? What do you tell them? Obviously, the property was underpriced.
Clearly.
And they really should be acting now before the price is raised again. It seems crazy, but it actually does work in the higher end.
In the higher end, I would say that
probably
could be.
Not in a city house.
Yes. And that's not the way your first-time buyers or, the average price point home, those buyers, that strategy, you've just lost that buyer who may be a week away from actually having everything in order to book that showing to put forth an offer, just you've taken it off the table. So it could be something on a different end, but not to misrepresent and have everyone think that's the strategy they want to take.
I'll let you ask this question for the next topic.
Any requirements to build a structure within a certain time period?
This would pertain to when you're buying a building lot. It's common in other areas because of congestion and overpopulation that the government doesn't typically want you subdividing lots and selling them to people that are going to either speculate on them or not do anything with them because they require more housing, not more building lots in that community. So to answer this question, the answer is no. Moving along.
Okay.
How to have, and you're the expert on this. We have covered this before, but we're going to cover it with a different slant today. To how do you have a flawless, super smooth pre-closing inspection? The pre-closing inspection usually done the day before, preferably the morning prior to the actual signing of the papers or the conveyance. What do you do on that pre-closing inspection that makes it shine and makes you stand out as an agent?
First of all, you
just drive by it at 60 miles an hour and say, yeah, looks the same, we're good to go.
You should go into the home. My pre-close viewing is typically always done the morning of or the day of closing. I would rather, especially this time of year, if the electricity went out or anything like that, not to leave it overnight. If anything, the clients have gone through, they're done by 9, 10 o'clock that morning, and hopefully they have the keys in their hand by 5 o'clock that night and are back into the home. So I'm not sure so I just know my process. First of all, schedule a pre-close viewing. Don't dismiss this. Don't say, I'm good, I don't need this. This should always be done. And if you're not able to physically be here, don't listen, because I know there's been at least 1 or 2 realtors who have said it's fine. I was in the place a week or so ago. I would insist that gets done. I go into the home and you go through and inspect it to make sure it is in the condition that you agree to purchase it in. You check all the systems, all the repairs. You should bring a purchase and sale agreement. And I'm really curious, Michael, what you're talking about, a super flawless. Do you have some method that you use?
Yes, but I'm not telling you because it's top secret.
So you're not letting the listeners know?
You've covered it. You check the house out. You make sure it reconciles with the contracts which you've signed. You make sure your fuel levels are there. I don't know how you're going to check a propane tank. You could get a receipt. You actually probably want the receipts for the oil because even those oil meters don't work very well. You have your hand up again.
Yeah. So who gets the receipts? How is that taken care of?
Typically, the vendor would send the receipts to their agent or their agent and their lawyer.
Correct. It would be the lawyer usually is who they end up
Well, the lawyer
sending.
has to receive them.
Yes.
But sometimes they'll use the listing agent as a conduit.
Yeah, I find most times the lawyer says, send me the top-up slip, and I tell them, if you want to send it to me, great, but who has to have it is the lawyer, because for a seller's point of view, if you want a fuel adjustment, if that's how it's written in your contract agreement, the way our default clause is there will be a fuel adjustment where the seller's responsible to top up the propane or the oil if that's the heat source for the home, and the buyer is going to compensate you for a full tank of oil or a full tank of propane. If you want the buyer and the buyer's lawyer to be able to believe that they are full, and like you had mentioned, Michael, it's kind of hard to tell if a propane tank is indeed full. That top-up slip within a couple days, typically of closing, will confirm or verify that.
Well, the oil tanks do have a meter, but the little cork dewy thing gets saturated with oil and they don't work after a while. The propane tanks, the newer ones, you've probably seen them, they do have a meter on them. It's sort of like when you pick up the car at the airport that you're renting, it says full, but chances are the guy filled up 60 miles from the airport.
Yes.
And the needle's still saying full. Let's close her down.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of the Michael and Patty Show, otherwise known as MAPS, PEI's podcast that helps guide and navigate you through the buying and selling and a little bit of Prince Edward Island. And if you're looking for an extension of this, we do have the Facebook group, Moving to Prince Edward Island, spelled completely out, from the Michael and Patty podcast, where we feature these episodes with a little snapshot summary so that you can plan and maybe listen or download the videos or the podcast episodes that resonate or are applicable to you in real time. We do have Toolbox Tuesdays that are filled with lots of jam-packed information to help fill your toolbox for your needs, whether you're buying or selling.
And if you do have a moment and you're listening to this on Apple Podcast or whatever, take the time to give the podcast a star rating, give us some feedback, have yourself a great day. Thanks again for listening.
Thanks for listening.